minutes, been there for a couple of months. Before that, he was an executive producer and story editor for ESPN for 15 years. And before that, he was with ABC for 9 years in various producer roles, but he was also a reporter in their London bureau. And the most impressive thing I have to say, that I really love this, and it just shows the third culture kid in all of us. Michael is bilingual English, Spanish, but he's also fluent in
Yeah.
French and Italian. So on that note, let me hand it to you, Michael, to introduce our other panelists.
Thank you, Clive. And thank you, Janet, for setting all this up. Thank you to all these panelists, some who I've recognized from St. Cloud. Thanks for showing up on the different time zones, different geography. And the goal of this, as Clive and Janet said, is we just want a discussion about international life, what works, what's been great, what's been a little bit trickier. So we'll have time for questions, but I want to kick it off, especially thanking our panelists who are all over the world, across classes, and I'll let them introduce themselves because I will butcher their names and resumes. So why don't we kick off Marie Schwartz, if you want to just give us a little sense of yourself,
Sure.
where you are, how you got to ASP, how long you were there, and what you're
Yeah.
doing professionally.
So I love this community because we all have just benefited so many different ways from our experience. I was lucky. I always say I'm lucky because my family moved to Paris when I was going into fifth grade, and I stayed there for 8 years, which is kind of unusual. I think in my graduating class, there were only 12 of us that were there that long. And so I really, I experienced the elementary school, the middle school, the high school, and I got an excellent education. My family, my parents were born in Germany, and became naturalized American citizens. So for them, it was important because we also lived in Brussels and Frankfurt when I was much younger, but we at that moment had come from Detroit. So they just wanted to continue. They weren't sure how long we would stay in Paris. So that's why they prioritized putting us into an American school. So I have to, credit them for giving me that consistency. But I managed to learn French fluently. I mean, the French instruction at ASP was groundbreaking. I remember wearing those headphones in my earliest years, learning from videos, and that was very, I thought, looking back on it, very, very innovative. And of course, then I watched TV and I learned French that way, and I interacted with people in the streets and shopped and so forth. So for me, graduating, with that much time at ASP meant that I didn't really know what American schools were like. So in 11th grade, we had this huge influx of kids from IBM because they moved their headquarters to Europe, their international headquarters to Paris. So that was a first taste of what, those kids might have experienced. But then once I got to college, I had excellent math instruction, and I was able to apply to be an engineer at Princeton. I was accepted at Princeton and a couple of other places, but I chose Princeton because it was close to a big city. It wasn't like, Dartmouth or something. So when I got to Princeton, I realized how different I was. I think I just was a lot more resourceful. I mean, my parents traveled a lot. So my experience at college was informed by, like, let's get going, let's do this, I was on the student council. It wasn't difficult for me to adapt, and I credit that with just having been exposed to so many different cultures and just needing to adapt. And after college, so I took French and German as easy courses because engineering was so hard. So I became aware of a scholarship that I could apply for in Germany called the Deutsches Akademisches Austauschdienst, DAAD it's called. And I got a free, academic year in Hamburg. So that was really cool. And I don't think I would have applied abroad. So it was kind of like a gap year in reverse. And then from there, I applied to work for McKinsey in Paris. And I got the job, and then the socialist government was elected, François Mitterrand, and so they thought their clients would all become nationalized or something. So they moved me to Chicago, where I knew no one. So then I worked for McKinsey for a couple of years. But anyway, I don't want to go through every single part of my background, but my languages really helped. And McKinsey, I was translating, I was going on client visits, or they had projects in Europe and they didn't know how to interview people, so I was taken along to do simultaneous translations. And then from there, I went to business school. And so that opened up a whole new, type of career. I gravitated towards American Express after business school because, again, they're involved with travel, and I really wanted to stay involved in that space. So what leads me to today is that we moved to Boston when my kids were in middle school, and I needed to figure out what they could do in the summer. And we weren't about to live in Europe, or anywhere. So I came up with a concept of this company called teenlife.com, which basically curates academic and experiential learning opportunities for kids in grades 7 through 12. So it's a way to replace living abroad. If you can send your kid to Latin America or Europe or somewhere to learn a language, these programs exist and they work. I mean, even 2 weeks in a foreign country is life-changing for some kids. So that is really how I have, used my experience throughout my life, really, to inform what I do today. And it's really gratifying to do that.
Great.
And I should say, I sold my company to U.S. News and World Report last August. So that was a good way to, now think about what I should do next. I'm still working there, but I'll be done in July. So I'm looking for new opportunities.
Yeah. And you're still in Boston, Marie?
Oh, yes. So I still live in Boston, but I'm currently in California and just dealt with needing to evacuate a little bit. Luckily, the house I'm living in was not burnt down. So,
Oh my gosh.
yes, but I
Best of luck. And anybody else who's on the West Coast.
Yeah, but yes, I live in Boston, which
yeah.
is great. It's very European.
Erica Yashiro, give us a little introduction to yourself, what you're doing now, where you are, and how you got to ASP.
Sure. I can I'm not too sure which part of my life I should really start with because when I was
Wherever you want, wherever you want.
because when I was first talking with Janet, and she's like, "Oh my goodness," because I started from when I was born all the way to where I got here, and then I guess I moved around a bit, and when I was little. So I don't know if I should talk about that, or maybe I can. And I'm sure that I'm not the only person out there who's kind of moved around all their lives. But anyway, so just to, yeah. So I was born in Japan, and then after that, when I was 4, my dad got a job in the U.S., so we moved to the U.S. And then his company wanted to open a new branch in Japan, so he sent all of us, the whole family, to Japan. And that's where I started going to first grade well, I did kindergarten in the U.S., first grade at the Canadian Academy in Kobe, and then first grade in Japanese. And then my dad got accepted to the business school in Boston. So we went back to the US for about a year and a half, and then he graduated and got a job in Geneva. We moved to Geneva, and that was when I was in fourth grade. Fourth grade. So, and then after that, we moved to Paris, did my 5th grade in French. Didn't do so well. And then, yeah, so and then at some point, my parents wanted to open up a new company in Japan. So my sister and I got sent to Switzerland for a year to experience or experiment boarding school. And then we came back to Paris. And then I still wasn't too happy with the French system. So my mom says, okay, do you want to go to college in France or in a different country? And I said, maybe in a different country. So in the end, that took me to the American school. So that was after. So I arrived in the American school after my 11th grade, after finishing the Bac Blanc in the French school, and I went down a grade into 10th grade, and then so I had 6 months to get into the flow of things before I started the International Baccalaureate education. And Yep. So then I was there for a total of 2.5 years, or 2 years and 1 semester. And that was absolutely awesome. I really loved it there. French school, I was moving around so much because at first I was in a French school, and then I switched to another public school with a French system. No, a public school, French school with an American system, and I wasn't too happy. And then finally to the ASP. And so in a total, I had, by then I had switched schools about 12 times. So finally, I was feeling like I was feeling more happy, more comfortable. English was really what I was most used to, I guess, throughout my life. And suddenly I can understand the way people are teaching, because the French system of teaching is very different from the Americans' way. And suddenly my grades were going up, and I was actually making lifelong friends, and becoming a little more normal, I guess, before I went on to, and then graduation arrived, and then we move on. But then I went to the US, to Cornell University. Um, I was there for 4 years, and another 2 or 3 years doing research there. As a lab assistant. And then I met Joe Handelsman, who was visiting from University of Wisconsin in Madison. I don't know if anybody knows Joe Handelsman, but she went on to become one of the science education advisor for Barack Obama at some point later on in life. But it was before that I met her, and she encouraged me to apply to UW for my graduate school. So I went to UW-Madison for graduate school. And then in the meantime, I got a fellowship to do a research in project in France. So I went to Montpellier, and so I came back to France, which was great. And did my 7 months there. I met my future husband. I made friends and collaborators with whom I still collaborate in research. And then I went back, finished my PhD, and then I got a fellowship to go to Switzerland, or back to Switzerland, I guess. So I was in the University of Lausanne to do a postdoctoral research project there. And then they have a 5-year limit after. Oh yeah, and I made a baby there too. And then after the 5-year limit, we moved to Zurich, and I was a bioinformatician there, and then got a staff scientist position in Aalborg, Denmark, northern Denmark. So we were there for about 4 or 5 years. And then we moved to Dortmund in Germany, and that's where we are right now. Right now I'm working as a freelance life scientist in research support, and in editing and proofreading and science writing. So it really kind of spans this sort of life science support in various aspects, because I think different people have different needs, and I try to sort of keep my options open so that I can really help people where they need the most help, basically. That's kind of me.
Excellent. Wow. All right. Ajda Leprad, class of '03. Where are you? How did you get to ASP, and where have you been?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ajda. I am, my maiden name is Ajda Berryman. So if anyone's familiar with the Berryman, that was me. I live in New York City, but definitely got here through a little trip around the world, like some of these folks here. So I was born in London. My father was working for the US government, so we were diplo brats, for any of you familiar with that term. My father was French American, my mother Turkish, and my father named me Ajda because he fell in love with a pop singer in Turkey named Ajda Pekkan. So there you go. And I did end up singing at ASP actually. So he wasn't far off from giving me that name. But yes, born in London, and then we moved every 2 or 3 years until I graduated from high school. So we lived in London, Iceland, Senegal, Mauritius, Italy, and France. Yes, it was fun for sure. I would do it all over again if I could. I started high school in Milan in 9th grade and then finished in Paris. So I was at ASP from 10th to 12th grade. And for me, because I grew up so close to the French side of my family, my grandmother was one of seven, so we had a lot of cousins, and we always kept returning to Paris, or Auvergne, where they're originally from. Um, I think ASP for me was definitely like feeling like home because I could blend in both like my French and American side of me. Um, and to this day, it's Paris is always my second home. So I try to go back as often as I can. When I graduated, I also did the IB, by the way. That was also fun. I actually moved from Paris to Harrisonburg, Virginia, and went to James Madison University. So it's when Marie talks about, adapting, that was definitely probably the biggest culture shock of them all that I went through. At the time, Harrisonburg was definitely still very kind of rural-ish. I didn't know how to drive a car yet, hadn't gotten my license, so that was a fun thing to orient myself around. I knew I wanted to study something international since I already had that bug in me, but I didn't want to go government, so I went business. So I graduated with a double major in international business and French. I cheated with French. Obviously, that was a little easy for me. Um, then I started working at a small intelligence firm in DC and just doing market intelligence. I did that for about 3 years. And then one of our clients poached me to work for them full time called Axway. So Axway is actually a French company. They're owned by Sopra Group in Paris. And so I worked for them for about 5 years and got to go to Paris often, which was nice. But then they actually moved me out to California. So I moved to San Francisco with them. And that is actually where I met my husband. And he always laughs that I married him for his French last name, even though he's not French. He's very much born and raised in Connecticut. Um, but yeah, I lived there for about 6 years. We got married there. Also, I started working for Salesforce there. So some of you may be familiar with Salesforce. And then we actually moved to New York about 5 years ago for an opportunity, for him to launch a startup. And also, I've always wanted to live in New York. I think it's a very cosmopolitan, it's a great um, melding of all cultures internationally. And I feel like if there was anywhere in the US as a third culture kid, I think New York is one of like the top cities to live in. So I moved out here. So was still working for Salesforce at the time. So I just transferred out here. And then now I work for ServiceNow, which is in the similar space as Salesforce. And I have been doing marketing and product marketing ever since. And so, yeah, just me, my husband, my cat who's taking the snooze over there. And yeah, that is my
Great.
story.
Awesome. Thanks, Ajda.
Mhm.
And not, I was going to say finally, but not finally. Jacob Saltzman, class of 15. What's your ASP origin story and where are you now?
So I came to ASP for my ninth grade, and I graduated in 2015. Before that, I was in Paris. I grew up in Paris, but I had moved to Switzerland for 3 years, just going to school there, and was very happy to move to ASP. Grew up with the guidance of Aaron, which was pretty amazing. Throughout all the pack morning assemblies and whatnot were great. Um, and yes, good times, and just always had an affinity to kind of support ASB and maintain lifelong friends from people in my class to teachers that I still speak to today. Um, and graduated from ASP in 2015. And really, what stuck with me when I moved from various schools was how many smiles we're seeing every day in the halls when we were growing up, which was great. And that's what probably stuck with me the most. Um, After I graduated, I went to the University of Vermont, and I, by chance, ended up studying like international relations and like a paramedicine. So I became a first responder, and kind of worked through that through college, and was like going to school all day and on the life flight helicopter at night, which was probably not the best idea, but we made it work. and stuck with it. And I graduated in 2019, and on the heels of COVID, ended up deploying to New York City in March of 2020 when COVID struck, and working in the field hospitals there for a few months, which I think it all stems from the ability to move quickly. I think that's a general theme that I hear a lot of people discuss and bring to the table. Just being able to pick up and go and meet people, interact and integrate is the name of the game with all this. So I think that really served me right. Towards the tail end of, or the summer of 2019, I ended up had an opportunity randomly to move into the film industry, which was an enjoyment. Also in the healthcare space, just doing safety consulting and paramedicine and like COVID prevention for the film industry in Greece, with some various Netflix movies in Serbia. So I did that for 3 years, but again, just like having no place, the Marriott was home for 3 years. And then when the film strikes kind of set in, ended up moving to Florida primarily for the warmth. And then since then I kind of rotate around. I work in the film industry. I run some clinics in the Bahamas on some like private islands, and more notably, I worked recently, and I still do, for the Paris Olympics, which allowed me to come back to Paris in like a health and safety capacity, but was really glad to be around for 7 months. And again, just the ability to kind of integrate, speak French and English, kind of bridge the gap between two cultures was the biggest help. I mean, my team, considering how international the Olympics were, just being able to translate from French and English, that in a way my job title should have just been translator, because that's what I did most of the time with people. So yeah, that's where I'm at now, and we're just wrapping up Paris, and we have some movies going on here and there, and yeah, that's what we're going. That's what's going on.
Thank you, Jacob. I mean, I started to make a list of all the countries everybody was mentioning, but I just stopped because it's like there's too many, which is what I love about ASP and the international community, is that there is no set model. You're going to find different stories and different personal paths everywhere. So just quickly, I know, Clive, thank you for introducing me on the professional side. Just to give you my ASP story, I got to ASP in the early parts of my junior year of high school, as my father was in the diplomatic service as well. I got plopped in a little bit later than everybody else. Was one of the people that guided me around is Megan Palanza, who was on this call at some point, who was fantastic. Gunyai, who was back at ASP, also helped me on the soccer team, everything. And I felt like, where has this group of people been my whole life? I just immediately felt, this is my home. This is where I've always meant to be. And when I try to explain that to people, like, they don't get it, because it's like, well, they're from all over the world. How could you feel like they were your? It's like, I don't know. It just was. It just was. There were just, everything clicked. And I think going to college and professionally, everything that I was trying to do was to recreate that feeling of like, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? So I bounced around. I found journalism by chance, and I felt like this is the job that will allow me to do a lot of the things that I enjoyed at ASP. I can travel. I can speak languages. I can, if they tell me to get on a plane, I can get on a plane and go somewhere new and figure it out. So that's been my guiding light from ASPs. Just try it and see if you like it, and if you don't, then you can come back home and try something else. And I'm currently in New York City at CBS, but still live with that idea of where can we explore, where can I meet more interesting people, and where can I use the skills that I have to just keep traveling. So a lot of great stories. We're here to talk about the pros and cons of international upbringing. So let's go around to the panelists. If you could give us a sense of what is the thing that you got from your international upbringing that really helped you professionally in your professional life. Let's start with Ajda.
All right. Well, I think, adaptability is definitely one of those things, and being resourceful, I think was definitely part of it. With being able to speak French fluently, it helped me, with my work at Axway. It has helped me with my work at Salesforce as well in the past, and now at ServiceNow. And the major advantages I've seen is just being able to work with international colleagues that much easier. I think just understanding the cultures behind how people work, just certain etiquettes, knowing that France takes a whole month off in August is something that not every American knows at these companies here. So, but also just being able to foster relationships. So, for example, here at ServiceNow, even though it's a global company, there's definitely still some opportunity to increase operations globally, and that's one thing that I'm able to do is work with our French colleagues more. I go and speak at conferences because I can speak the language, but also I can learn more and share more what we're doing back here in the US. So I think just fostering those relationships has been really helpful professionally for both not just myself, but the people that I work with as well.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, no, that it's that combination of hard skills. You can speak languages, but also almost more importantly is that those soft skills where you can understand people from other cultures and not have a rigid view of way to do things.
Exactly.
Marie, how about you? What's the thing
Yeah, I
from
was just
your
thinking about
upbringing?
that. Building teen life took a while because when I started, it seemed like nobody else realized how important experiential learning was. It's changed completely since then. So it allowed me to stick with it and take the time to curate all of these opportunities that I knew were out there. And we got big enough that we were then licensing our data to platforms like Naviance and so forth. But without having experience, I don't think I could ever have started Teen Life without the experience of living abroad. And so as you go through some of these conversations with people, the people who are offering the programs are often people who lived abroad growing up. So it's really a little community. So yeah, I would credit my sort of resilience, I guess, or what is it? The persistence to having grown up abroad. Yeah, because
Right.
I just felt that it was not inexcusable, but it was so imperative that every student have an experience like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Erica, how about you? What part of your upbringing do you feel brought the most or impacted your professional life the most?
I guess it's hard to kind of pinpoint because I've never really had the non-international lifestyle. For
Right.
me, just moving around and seeing like having to deal with all these pros and cons on a day-to-day basis is just
Yeah.
day-to-day life, let's say,
Yeah.
and so I don't think I ever got it really easy in that respect. But yeah, I think well, it did take time. I think if we're so kind of like bombarded with novelty all the time, it takes a while to sort of kind of start realizing, okay, this is the pros and this is the con, and then we start kind of developing a strategy to survive all this. And I think it really took me a long time. And I think at this point, I'm starting to realize, okay, the biggest pro it may be that is that I actually realized that different people from different cultures and different countries actually have very different perspectives of everything. It's not so obvious when we talk when we just talk to people or when we just have a chat, but it really is the perspective.
Mm.
Like Scandinavians think very differently from Germans right across the border, who think very differently from the French, who are very different from the Swiss, and they cross borders all the time. And I just I just accept the fact that they're all different, and it's just how it is.
Yeah.
The problem often is that they cannot necessarily accept that I'm just different. It's and then it's
Yeah.
like when I was working in Denmark, for instance, they're very nice people, but they're like, they sometimes had problems. They say you're too, they don't say it, but then like my friend would tell me, oh, no, you just sound really aggressive to people, and I'm just. And then other people was like, yeah, you're just very American, and I'm like, I'm Japanese, or and then the Japanese people are saying, yeah, you're not very Japanese. Whereas the Germans say you're very Japanese. And then, it just goes on like that. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, everybody just has very, very different perspectives on me. It's very hard for them to really pinpoint what I do. And then they say, okay, I'm Japanese. Oh, I thought you were Vietnamese. Oh, I thought you were Korean. I thought you were
Yeah.
American. Are you French? Why do you have a French accent when you speak German? It's so yeah, I think it's just that very different people have very different perspectives. And that's understanding
Yeah.
that and accepting that is maybe what I kind of developed the most, or like what I guess that's the biggest part right now that comes to mind. But yeah,
Yeah.
being
No,
accepted is the
that
other issue.
yeah, that's I think the having the awareness, which is something that I think everybody on this Zoom will recognize is like I'm aware of what I know and what I don't know, and that not everybody's going to think the way that I do because we've been exposed to it. And it can also be, I mean, within the U.S., you also have, you know, from New York City to Idaho are very different cultures and communities, and people have those barriers. And I think that ASP allowed me and allows a lot of us to see the barriers and try to get around them in whatever way we can. Um, but I've always found it interesting that people do try to put you in a box. They almost have the need to put you in a box. You know, wait a minute, are you from Germany or are you from America? I don't understand because I need to put you in my category. Otherwise, it's too confusing. So um, we we have that shape shifting ability.
Yes, and I have the
Jacob,
same
what?
problem with I have
Sorry,
the
go ahead.
same problem at my work too.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, as a freelancer, they try to put me into a box and it doesn't quite fit and it just
yeah,
frustrates people. But I'm
yeah.
like,
It
I'm
does. It
sorry,
does.
it's just me. I guess
But
they
that's
try.
also, I think, it's your superpower, right? To put it a certain way, that's our superpowers that we can shapeshift, we can move, and we can feel comfortable in a lot of different places. So, Jacob, what about you? What's the that you feel has had an impact on your professional career?
Think that when you, at a young age, when you learn, like, I want to say tolerance, or you learn just cultural awareness, because it's so strong. And when you learn cultural awareness at a really young age with a lot of different nationalities,
Mm,
and people from all over the world, and you kind of grow up with that. Where I really started to see it, where I could see, I guess, my lens, right, or like my outlook on interaction in kind of a professional space, but also like a personal space, was just with my travels in different countries, including France and in different parts of Europe, is I guess when you see conflict based on misunderstanding or miscommunication within cultures, and all of a sudden, like, you're able to not have that conflict because you have just a general awareness, or some cultural aspect, something that people do, or some people that
mhm.
whatever aspect of culture you want to discuss, and or language or things like that. I think that that's an area where it's just taking time, allowing other people to have that space, and something that's kind of where I learned it from ASP. So that's really where I feel it the most, and I see it the most. I use the example of the Olympics again and again. So many people from the national landscape, a lot of like misunderstandings arising from just an inability to communicate effectively because of a language barrier, or because of just an understanding of how things are done. Let's say how things are done in France versus how things are done in the US, because the Olympics is a lot of that. A lot of people
Mm.
come together from these different parts of the world to produce something amazing. And um, just being able to bridge that gap, not have any issues, because you can, do that. Obviously, you'll never be able to fully like embrace another culture, in my opinion, and like assimilate, or maybe the best word is replicate. But just being able to be tolerant is kind of where I landed with the my with ASP.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Hans. It's right there in the title of the talk, pros and cons. I like to think of it more as challenges rather than cons. So, um, what are some challenges that being an international community or being raised internationally, um, you've had to deal with, whether professionally or personally, and how did you deal with it? Ajda, let's go back to you.
Oh, these are good questions. Um, I think part of the challenge, I mean, for me, moving to the US actually for the first time when I was 18, that was already a challenge for me because I only have one passport, and it's an American passport, but I didn't grow up here.
Mm,
So just I think that adaptation and going to a school where there was only like a 1% international community. And so they definitely were like, wait, you're French, but you're not, but you're wait, hold on, what?
yeah.
They couldn't put me in a box.
Yeah.
So I think just getting used to that, whereas like my entire life I'd grown up in international high schools or British schools, just everyone was always from somewhere else. So they were used to seeing people like
Mm,
me and like you and so forth. But the school I went to for college wasn't necessarily the same. But I think honestly, what helped me get through that, and that's actually what's helped me throughout my, as I grow older, I think people are more fascinated than confused. I think it's just like, oh, tell me more, right? Because I think people start to see more of the world and they really want to kind of identify with that. But I find that um, learning how to find a sense of home within yourself and your people, I think is more possible than trying to find an affinity with like a certain place because that place always changes, but the people that you surround yourself with can be a constant and become like your chosen family over time that really get you. I've actually found also just being very open about who I am, what I like, what my interests are, what I understand, what I don't understand, because there's a lot of American pop culture that I never understood growing up. Um, is also important. And I find that people are very receptive to that actually, and it actually opens the door to fostering really close relationships with people, both professionally and personally. And I find also that while we are both like we're very adaptable people, but I think also the challenge is that sometimes you can like lose your own identity to try to adapt to the specific culture that you're in, right? You can almost sometimes over rotate. And so I've learned to kind of take a step back sometimes when I find that I'm not in a good place, or if I find that I'm just missing something in my life, it's because I've lost something within my own like identity that I need to bring back, whether it's something creative, whether it's a hobby, whether it's, a routine or whatever it may be. Maybe it's contacting someone I haven't spoken to in a while to kind of like bring back that sense of self. I find that that has been something that over time I've had to navigate and I have found ways to like incorporate that as well. So I think just loosely, like those are all like the kind of different challenges that I have found.
yeah.
But being open, reaching out, trying, going back to some of my hobbies, things like that have helped me find, the true identity and the home within myself and my people.
Those are great points. I think we probably have all been in a moment where, again, because we are chameleons, we're able to do just about anything that you start going down that road and you think, wait a minute, how did I get so far down this road and forgot what makes me me? So that's a great point. And your point about your community, right? I think, I mean, I remember growing up and always hating the question, where are you from? Because yeah, I'd say like, well, how much time? I don't even know where I'm really from. How much time do you have? And so, in my mind now, I think of it more of as who are your people, right? And I'm sure everybody on this call has that stories of bumping into either ASP people or people in international schools. And once you make that connection anywhere in the world, whether you're in an airport terminal or you're in the farthest place on the planet, um, that connection is there, and those are your people. And I still stay in touch with so many of my friends from ASP, much more so than either work colleagues or from college. So that community is there. We just have to make that effort to reconnect with them. So, Marie, what about you in terms of challenges and how you've dealt with them?
Yeah, no, I think some of the things Ajda brought up resonated with me. I think a lot of times people are intimidated,
Yeah.
especially when you say Paris, like, oh my God, yeah, and they don't quite know what to make of you. Yeah, and what kind of personality. So sometimes I have, I can sense I don't connect as well, especially with, I also don't connect well around sports, professional sports. I don't know anything about football. My TV knowledge is limited. My music knowledge is limited. And so if that's all people want to talk about, I don't really have much to say, right?
Yeah.
So, but that hasn't really affected my life too much, but you definitely gravitate to people who've traveled, I would say, or
Yeah.
lived overseas. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I think my sister probably felt more like she didn't like moving around so much. So she's basically had the same house her whole life, whereas my husband and I bop around a lot. So it really does depend on your personality. But I've never thought of moving around as a negative.
Yeah. Well, that's very funny.
But
My,
connecting
my,
with people on certain at a certain level is definitely
yeah.
tricky. Yeah.
It is the personality is a key component, no question. Some people react, I don't ever want to move again. I'm going to stay here. And I think a lot of us are like, I can't, if I'm in one place too long, I start getting very nervous. I feel like something is wrong, right? I've been here too long. It's kind of an internal clock, for sure. Jacob, what about you? Challenges that you felt?
Well, I think, the challenges is that similar to what other people have said, it's, when you move a lot, it's even as much as you try to put down like roots and whatnot, to know that you're leaving again can be challenging to build like long-term, lifelong relationships. Um, or you start to build relationships with people, and then you're leaving, and then and it's it can create a kind of difficulty on the other end. So I think finding, if you found the community at ASP, can you find a similar community later on? And that can be a challenge. That's actually a challenge for me personally.
Yeah.
But again, there's pros and cons. It's just like replicating that community. It can be difficult.
Yeah.
So just finding people that have that same like mentality of living in the moment, present day, and then and kind of and working off of that. What happens tomorrow doesn't really matter. Is kind of the way to approach it, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Hey, Michael,
Sorry, go ahead, Clive.
unless you have some burning questions, I thought maybe we'd give people.
Oh, I have so many burning questions.
I bet you do, and
I'm going to put them
everybody's
aside.
got them. I'm wondering if we could. We still have a lot of people on the call, so I spent some time just randomly putting people into some breakout rooms. I thought we'd maybe go 15